Why does it seem like the Ivy League is becoming horribly overrated? Now, I get this is a pretty controversial statement, and I'm sure there's some alumni ready to send me some angry emails, but we've been told for decades that the Ivy League schools are America's ultimate leadership factories, the breeding grounds for presidents, justices, CEOs, and thought leaders. But the truth is, the numbers just don't really support the hype anymore. If you're looking for where America's real leaders are coming from, you're probably not going to find as many as you think sitting in Harvard's lecture halls or Yale's debating societies. Instead, you're going to find them at a variety of other places. Let's start with the facts. A recent study found that the majority of America's governors, state Supreme Court justices, and attorneys general didn't attend Ivy League schools. And the same holds true for the leaders of top law firms in nearly every state. In 44 states, the most common alma mater for managing partners and executive committee members is not an Ivy League university. Even when we zoom out to the private sector, Ivy League grads are far from dominant. Sure, they account for 10% of the Fortune 500 CEOs and a large share of Rhodes Scholars. But when you look at state-level governance and the legal world, Ivy League representation is either marginal or entirely absent. In 18 states, not a single top leader graduated from an Ivy League school. Not one. So, why does this matter? Well, maybe it's because it reveals how warped the narrative about elite education has become. The media, politicians, and cultural elites obsess over the Ivy League as if it's the only game in town. And in doing so, they ignore the outsized role of other educational institutions in shaping America's real leadership. It also demonstrates how an elite institution can water down its own status by relying too heavily on its past and not enough on the content of the education provided. So, if all this is true, why does the myth of the Ivy League persist? Well, partly because the conversation is often dominated by people who live in places where Ivy League schools still hold disproportionate sway. States like New York, Massachusetts, and California. In these bubbles, attending an Ivy is seen as a ticket to success. But outside of these elite enclaves, the story is completely different. Another reason why it might persist is networking and favoritism. Now, the old adage of it's not what you know, but who you know definitely has some truth to it. But interestingly enough, when institutions stop attracting the people actually becoming industry and government leaders, well, then you're going to lose the advantage of the networking as well. Ultimately, while the Ivy League is still relevant, you can't really call it America's leadership factory anymore. It's really becoming a niche institution catering to a narrow segment of society that's increasingly out of touch with the rest of the world. So maybe it's time to stop equating elite with better in this sense. Because if leadership is the measure of success, the Ivy League just isn't delivering like they used to. Ultimately, higher education is supposed to produce greater capability. Graduates who can leave the university and be trusted to perform at the height of their field. An Ivy League credential may very well open doors, but without the ability to actually perform, it'll get you thrown out of those doors just as quickly. High demand fields require high-performing individuals. And when institutions begin to substitute that for other agendas, it's only a matter of time before they can no longer rely on the reputation that the quality of their product no longer supports.